One of the most common uses for calligraphy is, of course, invitations, wedding invitations, party invitations. In fact, you nail this down, you can be making money, recoup your expense on this program, and you can be doing all the invitations for your friends. Let's talk about just a few things that are particular to an invitation. First of all, I'm going to assume you're doing on an envelope. If you have the luxury of a light table, any kind of light table, but I have this nice one here, you may want to create such a thing as a guide sheet where you can lay this down, because I will tell you from hard experience that the easiest mistake to make on an envelope is that your type begins to go uphill or downhill. So let's say we're sending an invitation to Mr. and Mrs. Williams, Mr. ampersand Mrs. Okay, so it's really nice to have this guide sheet underneath. If you are insecure about nailing the calligraphy, just hitting it cold, then of course do what we did on the certificate. Write it out on a practice sheet first and then trace it. And of course that doubles your labor and makes it quite a big job. But you know what? If you need to get started that way, and then maybe after doing 3 or 4 or 50 or 60 of them, you don't need that crutch anymore, then you can throw it away. Does that make sense? You will also notice that I am now using not a dip pen, but just a felt tip pen, because for a thing that where you're doing a lot of them, this is a good enough tool. People usually expect an invitation to be done not quite as extensively as something like a fine art piece or even a certificate. Now, let's say you don't have a light table. So now you're just working with an envelope and you can't put a guide sheet underneath it. There are a couple things you can do. One is, I know that if you're working on an envelope, you have a whole box of them. Use one of the other envelopes. Here's the important part. I'm lining it up on this edge over here. You could use a ruler, you see, especially one like this is transparent. But if you don't have that, line it up here, and that creates a perfectly horizontal line for you. Now you want to have it down far enough so that your next line of type doesn't run into it. You don't necessarily want to mar this up, but again, you can get a separate piece of paper. You get the idea. 1, 2, 3, 4, South Main Street, M. Do you remember, did I tell you that the easiest mistake in the world to make is to misspell something? Well, that is certainly the case. Main Street. Oh, I think if it's a very formal invitation, you're actually supposed to spell out all of the words, well, except for Mr. and Mrs. We didn't spell those out, did we? Put a little flair at the end of the line whenever you can, so that people will make sure that they notice that it's actually a hand-lettered invitation, not just a computer printout. Finally, Anytown, USA. That'll do. So again, I'm using this other piece of paper, this other envelope in this case, because I know you've got them there. If you're doing invitations, you've got a whole box of envelopes with you. If one gets messed up, well, you just sacrificed one. That's not a bad investment. Anytown, USA, 0, 1, 2, 3. Do you remember our numerals? 4. How many? 1, 2, 3, 4. Is one more? There we go. That's the zip code. And that's not a bad invitation. And I hope you'll be having fun and maybe even making money at this business. You're doing great. Let's keep going.